Flying, falling, and just generally dealing with 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional battlefield can seem tough, but it doesn't have to. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Timothy, though some people do call me Tim. I run 7 games a week, have been DMing for almost 30 years, and teach people how to run the best game of their life. Today's topic was submitted by Lone Wolf and Writer and voted to the top by the awesome tank class supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon. Thanks guys, you're literally the best. There's a couple of challenges that pop up around height in D&D, and not just if you're a halfling. The most common one is moving and targeting on a 2-dimensional map when adding in height. Less common, but still significant, is combat taking place in the air while falling. We'll tackle that second one in a minute. But first, there's 2 aspects to the 2D versus 3D problem. The first of which is actually pretty simple to fix, and that's just how you track height itself. Writing it on a sticky note or your Chessex battle map, or making a note in your virtual tabletop is usually enough, even if it is easy to forget to update it. But the second problem is the real problem. And that's how we measure between 2 horizontal points when height is also involved. Because most of us don't really want to break out Pythagoras. And I'm sorry for any high school math PTSD that just popped up for you there. Even if we did want to break out the math nerd stuff, it doesn't properly apply in D&D because the measurement of squares doesn't follow proper rules for measuring distances. Especially if you're running 5th edition with the rules as written. Because in 5th edition, diagonals and horizontals cost the same speed to move, which I hate, but I digress. Though it's not mentioned anywhere in the rules, because horizontals and diagonals are the same, it means that distances are actually really simple to figure out when adding in height. Height barely changes distances at all, actually, even if it seems like it should. There's no complicated counting and not even a reason to work it out on a side view to count the squares. All you have to do is use the higher number of either the horizontal or the vertical difference between you and your target. For example, if you're 60 feet away from your target on a battle map, but they are 70 feet higher than you, say you're at 30 feet and they're at 100, you are 70 feet apart when counting squares. But if they're only 30 feet higher than you, say they're at 60 and you're still at 30, and you're 60 feet away, then you are 60 feet away when counting squares. It's really simple. It might actually be one of the reasons why they used that simplified counting rule, and I have to grudgingly admit that is kind of cool. But if, like me, you want diagonal movement to be a little more realistic, and you want to be able to have a circular fireball instead of a square one, then perhaps you're using one of the simple optional rules from earlier editions of making every second diagonal cost double in order to approximate normal diagonal movement. If you are, then it's back to Pythagoras, which is why I have a chart to save myself the trouble of math in public. There's a link in the description if you want to get a copy for yourself, along with a growing list of other free time-saving tools. Meanwhile, combat while falling is where things get tricky. Because if we're using the rules as written, people take turns falling, zip along faster than the highest flying speed, and have no ability to control their horizontal movement. And even that is only if you're using the optional rules. It works fine for resolving a tough situation, but it takes some understanding, and it doesn't lend itself to the awesome cinematic skydiving movie scene that we have playing in our heads. If that's what we want, then we'll have to make some adjustments that I'll talk about in a little bit. But first, running it raw. And I have to give a caveat that if you're running it rules as written without any optional rules, then you can't. You're actually just going to have to make it up. Because without optional rules, there are no rules for when you fall, how fast you fall, or even how a flyer can recover from a fall. Fortunately, Xanthar's Guide to Everything has everything we need to cover those. You fall immediately. and then again at any turn that you start your turn falling if you're high enough. You fall 500 feet around, and flyers without hover recover as soon as they're not incapacitated, which caused them to fall, or by spending half of their movement on their turn to get not prone, which also caused them to fall. And if you do have hover, then you don't fall, period, under any circumstance. In practice, this means that combat while falling involves two subsets of combatants: the ever-falling and the flyer-fallers. Ever-falling characters and monsters don't have a fly speed, and thus, according to the rules as written, have no control over their horizontal movement or direction. They can't move closer or further away from anything, and their only movement is falling 500 feet at the end of each of their turns, straight down. They can take their actions as normal, but unless they have over 500 feet of range, then they can only affect individuals that are near to them at the time that their turn starts. Meanwhile, flyer fallers, those with a fly speed, can essentially spend up to half of their fly speed movement to adjust their altitude and or horizontal position every round, before then choosing to fall on their own terms and instantaneously, which means that they have a lot more control over whether or not they can use their action against those who are falling with them. And they're less often relegated to readied actions. Here's an example. In my Wandering Cavern campaigns on Monday and Wednesday nights, using Homie and the Dude's Studio Ghibli-inspired campaign setting, the players are often transporting themselves from one place to another on sweet sky-ships. Zephyrs powered by mysterious crystals that they use to deal with increasing imperial aggression, flying pirates, and, other adventurous encounters. It's a cool setting, and you can pick up your own copy at a discount by using my name over at their website. I'll leave the link in the descriptions and stuff. Anyway, with a set of janky wingsuits that can save them 5 times out of 6, my players are indeed insane enough to jump off of these skyships in order to chase, say, a fleeing Aarakocra, a member of the gang of the Fell Breeze, a crazy unseen stalker that they've been dealing with lately. So let's just naturally assume that's what happens. The initiative order looks like this. In mid-battle, the Aarakocra Aramancer leaps off the ship, flies 20 feet out from it, and goes prone, falling 500 feet instantly. Mirak, the Dragonborn Eldritch Knight, makes a 10-foot running start and leaps after, using his great strength to arc out after the Birdman. He also falls instantly, which brings him into range and allows him to swipe with his Doom Maul at the prone eagle. Incidentally, because he's not a flyer, the rules don't require him to go prone in order to fall, meaning he gets advantage. Ouchie for the Aarakocra. Then Mira attempts a running jump off the Zephyr to match Mirak, except she's a weakling and lands 10 feet short. She falls too, but has to make ranged attacks. Back to the Birdman, who rights himself with half his fly speed, disengages as his action, and moves out of reach of Mirak. They could just keep flying and let the crew fall past, but let's say that there's an important objective that we're racing towards down on the ground, and so the Aarakocra goes prone to fall as well. On Mirak's turn, Mirak hangs there, 500 feet above and out of reach horizontally from his foe. He can take his full action up there, doing whatever he likes, except he has no move speed that applies to flying. He decides to ready a javelin throw and ends his turn. Down he goes, 500 feet, at the end of his turn, instantly. Matching the elevation of the birdie, he uses his reaction to throw the javelin, but now has disadvantage because of the bird's prone condition. It gets weird. He can't do anything to get closer and is stuck just falling 500 feet round by round, using readied actions to interact with the combat. Mira, on the other hand, is a Fey Warlock and decides to use Misty Step to teleport in position to fall past the Birdman, readying a touch spell she hopes will level the playing field for when she falls into position, and so on and so forth. I hope it makes sense. You might have run falling battles in a different way. I tend towards the rules as written myself, but I'd love to hear how you pulled it off, especially if it went well. Hit me up in the comments, eh? For instance, maybe you want to make your falling combats more cinematic. Or you just hate the idea of poor Mirak falling down in a straight line when all the cool action flicks have the heroes practically chasing each other across the sky. It turns out that aiming while skydiving is not as easy as the movies make it look, which is probably why they include them in the movies. But a pretty common house rule might be to allow an athletics check in order to use your movement horizontally, either in full or in part, before you fall. I'd probably set the DC at 15, because 1, it should be kind of hard, and 2, you gotta reward players that have chosen not to make strength their dump stat. Another way to run it is to do away with the map entirely. Theater of the Mind is honestly at its best in situations like this, where the mind's eye delivers an awesome scene that a map just does not do any justice to.
With imagination.
Maybe you could use opposed athletics or acrobatics checks to determine whether or not characters can get adjacent or get away from one another. And then you just resolve the battle as normal with the deadline of the ground coming up to meet them. Or somebody pulling the cord on their 1 in 6 times this doesn't actually work janky wingsuit. Ultimately, in that situation, the important thing is not sticking to the rules perfectly, but making it fun for everyone involved. A problem that pops up, for instance, on that is that there's no way in the rules to fall faster or slower, which means that if people leap off of the Sky Zephyr in order to charge down after somebody who jumped off, but don't do so within 6 seconds of the guy who did, then they are completely out of luck and out of the fight entirely. But in the movies, it's possible to get a little more aerodynamic in order to fall faster or to splay yourself out in order to slow down. Put a check on it if you need to, but get everybody together and involved so that it can be exciting and fun to play. Or else just pull the cord on the scene and let one side escape so you don't just bleed tension waiting for the outcome of something that's already been decided. Just like I'm pulling the cord on this video. Don't forget to pick up your copy of the Pythagorean Theorem chart, and I'll see you in the next video. Here's a little love for my kitties in the meantime.